Hello, Miami alumni and friends. JJ Slager here with the Alumni Association. Pleased to be bringing you another webinar on career information, and we have a special guest, Marty Gilbert, Miami class of 1976, I believe, proud alum who had a very successful corporate career in leadership, and then started his own executive networking group. You can see the information on Marty's screen there, but he's the CEO and founder of NSENG in Chicago. And Marty is going to lead us on a presentation today about networking. As you know, we would love to have live questions too. Marty's going to stay at the end and we'll come back on to answer your questions. So go ahead and put those in the comments below your video. And as we go, and without further ado, I'll turn it over to Marty and we'll see you at the end for questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, JJ. There's probably a very common feeling that a lot of people have towards networking, because it is one of those activities in the job search that a lot of people really hate doing because they just don't feel comfortable. It does take practice, but what I'm going to share with you today are some very specific actions that you should be taking to help, first of all, make you more comfortable being uncomfortable with networking, and then some very specific ideas and ways in which to leverage an existing network and a network yet to be tapped into. So I think it's going to be an opportunity for you to actually apply any one of these things immediately through the suggestions that I'm making. So JJ, if you could just bring up the slide deck, perfect. Okay. Before I get into the material, I just want to give you a real quick overview on the North Shore Executive Networking Group, or NSENG. This is a company that I started about 13 years ago. I've spent the bulk of my career working for large companies, in particular. Worked for the largest ad agency in the world in Japan, then worked with Motorola for about 18 years. And then since then, I've been working for mid-sized firms. But I started this business on my own as a side gig when I was working full time. And today, it's the largest job search group in the country. I've got over 10,000 members in this group. We have at least one member landing a new job every day. The group is very diverse. And of course, in today's world, it's important to have a network that gets you beyond the boundaries of the city where you're living, particularly given what has changed dramatically in the employment industry. And that's that so many jobs have become remote. So many jobs may likely stay remote. So for those of you that live in Cincinnati or Boston or Chicago or LA, Houston, you are not any longer confined to the city where you are located, because there's more opportunities that are opening up for folks to be remotely located for the right person. So NSENG has got events going on every couple weeks. The website is nsenginc.com. We've got virtual meetings, 3-hour workshops, 2-hour webinars. I do a lot of coaching in between. And I'm even doing some talent recruitment now for companies because they like to tap into the 10,000 plus members that comprise this group. We've got folks that come from all different, job backgrounds and all different industries. And that's important because you should not, as a networker, not be hanging around only with people that come from manufacturing or from the government or from professional services or IT. The diversity of an organization is really important because you never know who they are connected to. And we'll talk a little bit about that. The membership into NSENG is absolutely free. So I encourage you to just go to our homepage, sign up for the free membership. You're going to get access to 2 free webinar recordings from me in the process, and the opportunity to network with all the individuals. And we've got folks that come from some great backgrounds, from great universities, and an opportunity to help make introductions that you can't potentially get on your own. I also would suggest that you join our LinkedIn group. It's a very active group, very safe place to interact with folks. And I do have advertisers that are posting positions up here regularly. And so it's a great opportunity for you to network with people, but also to share some of the ideas or ask questions of the group on what you're doing in your job search. I've got over 17 on-demand webinar recordings on all different aspects of job search: resumes, LinkedIn profile, the applicant tracking system, and working with recruiters. So please go ahead and you'll see that under the job search resources page. And in addition to that, I've got these 3-hour on-demand workshop recordings. And these are also available on the website. Here's two upcoming events. Next week on Wednesday, the 26th, I'll be conducting a 3-hour workshop. It's all online, so anybody can participate, and it's going to be how to create and implement an effective job search plan from beginning to end. And I've got 21 different areas that every job seeker needs to make sure they've got in place and how to build them so that you can get far more visibility and connectivity into companies that you're trying to target. As an added bonus, I'm throwing in an extra 40-minute webinar recording on how to build a target company list. Because right now, you are no different than a new product being launched. And whenever we launch new products, one of the first things we do is to make sure we're clear on what the value of that product is, who's the audience we're trying to reach, and then what's the marketing tactics to get it to that audience. And this is no different for you as a job seeker because you are now that new product being launched. And building out a target company is a big part of getting your focus on your search and getting connectivity into people that can be very influential. Could be hiring managers, could be people that are going to weigh in on hiring decisions. Then on Wednesday, May 10th, I'm going to be doing a 30-minute session. It's a free Q&A session. It's on the LinkedIn Live platform. I do these about every 3 or 4 weeks. And this is going to be an open Q&A session. So I urge you to go ahead. You'll see it posted on our website. You'd see it posted on LinkedIn. And it's an opportunity for you to ask questions that maybe you haven't asked in the past, and we're wondering what might be some of the feedback. So let's talk first a little bit about networking and at a high level. Now, there have been a number of different surveys that have been done on people's greatest fears. And this one was done a few years ago by the New York Times. And the question was simply, what is your greatest fear? Number 3 in the ranking, because I can't recall what was 1 and 2, but number 3 was death. But number 4 and 5 are interesting because walking into a room full of strangers and speaking in public are 2 extremely valuable skills that you need to have when it comes to networking. And a lot of people are very uncomfortable in those situations. So I've also found a more recent survey. This was done by the Science of People. And again, ask the question, what are your greatest fears? And here is a ranking of the top 8 greatest fears that people in general feel. A fear of failure, a fear of rejection, a fear of change, public speaking, not being good enough, vulnerability, a fear of time, and a fear of loneliness. And I'm sure for those of you that are in a search right now or have been in one, you've probably experienced every one of these fears. And it's not unusual. The fact is that these are the kinds of things that hold a lot of people back from really leveraging their network to the degree that they can. Because there's no point in having 5 or 10,000 LinkedIn connections if you don't put them to use for you. If you aren't able to find folks through those network connections, then it doesn't really matter how many you have. But I can tell you, having joined LinkedIn back in 2004, I sit on today over 28,000 LinkedIn connections, and they all have potential value to me, not simply because of who they are, but who they can potentially introduce me into. So here's a quick question. What are the greatest fears that you encounter when it comes to networking to your next job? And these are some of the answers that I typically hear from people. I'm afraid of being rejected. No surprise. We saw that even in the survey we just talked about. I feel like I'm bothering people when I'm going after people in my network to potentially introduce me to somebody. I'm uncomfortable reaching out to people that I've never met before. And this is one you've really got to get over, because if you confine yourself only to people that you've met, you're going to really limit the number of people that can potentially help you. Another, fear that a lot of people have is that I feel embarrassed about being unemployed and asking for help. And that's something you've really got to get beyond. And just keep in mind the millions of people that have been unemployed for the last several years and the million more that are currently unemployed. People today are so much more willing to provide assistance and introductions than ever before, because there were, over a period of time, so many people that were out of work. So please don't feel bad about yourself because you find yourself in that situation. And the last one is, I'm not confident asking for help. And there are very specific ways in which you can ask for help when your chances of getting help go up significantly. So here are a few reasons and a few situations where a lot of people fail in their networking. One is you've got to allocate time for it. And a lot of people don't allocate enough time. Think about this. Most people spend an inordinate amount of their time responding to online ads to find their next job. But I can tell you only 15% of all the jobs that are filled by companies are filled as a result of an online ad. So if you just put that fact into practice, you should never spend more than 15% of your time answering online ads. It's an evening and weekend activity because the core part of the day should be spent for networking and building out your target company list. A lot of people don't build out that target company list, and it's really easy to do. Do it by industry, and you can get ideas for companies that you've never heard of, but your network can also suggest them to you. Number three, a lot of people just don't leverage their network in the right way. And in the case of number four, they don't ask in the right way to get what they want. Because in the end, we're looking for some very specific things that we think our network might be able to help us with. In that regard, there's a lot of preparation that goes into a networking encounter. Now, here's a few more. Number six, if you are going to a networking meeting, it always pays to arrive early. There's nothing more uncomfortable than walking into a room full of people and everybody's already paired up in groups of 3 and 4 and talking with each other. And here you are arriving 5 or 10 minutes before the meeting starts. And you don't feel comfortable breaking into some of these conversations. The best way around that, arrive early. A lot of people don't take the time to really develop a strong elevator pitch. And you've got to have that because you've got about 45 seconds to tell people who you are, what you do, and what you're looking for. And number 8 is important. A lot of you may have a lot of LinkedIn connections. Don't discount people because of their titles, because you never know who they're related to, who they're friendly with, where they go on weekends and meet with other people, because everybody has connections. And that's the principle behind LinkedIn. And we talk about the 6 degrees of separation to Kevin Bacon. Everybody is within 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, believe it or not. And it's been proven out time and time again. And LinkedIn is no different. The fact is that if you are networking and somebody makes an introduction for you, you got to follow up. And by all means, number 10, don't confine yourself to just people that you've met before, because then your universe is going to become too small. I can tell you, I don't know most of the people and have never spoken with most of the people that I'm connected to. I could never be expected to. But there's nothing wrong with going out to these folks and explaining your situation and how you think they might be able to assist you. So what do you want to get from networking? Okay. And I think the first answer is very simple, right? And the fact is that, everybody is, who's in a job search realizes, I think today, that networking is the predominant way in which people are getting jobs. Okay. Because there are folks that can help open the door. They can help get you introductions into places that you just can't get into on your own. What else do you want to get from networking? Well, item number 2, it's going to help you identify target companies. Because while you may feel a lot of the companies in the industry where you've been, I can assure you there are always going to be plenty that you don't have a clue about. You want to get to influential people that can introduce you into people that have influence if they themselves are not in some of the companies that you're trying to target. You want to get, referrals or references in, because statistics show that the best employees in companies historically are ones that have been referenced in, that have been referrals into a company. And believe me, you should never feel uncomfortable asking somebody for an introduction to somebody inside a company, because the people in those companies, if they go ahead and introduce you to a hiring manager and you start getting into the interview process and you ultimately get hired, well, they're going to walk away on average with somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 as an employee for having made that introduction. And that's why so many companies feel that when somebody inside the company makes a referral, they give it a lot of weight. And of course, you're doing that person a favor. You're going to put potential money in their pocket by giving them the opportunity to introduce you into a hiring manager. Because you always want to get an internal advocate where you can, because that makes your case so much stronger. You've been vetted. Somebody would be introducing you in because they believe that you're a strong candidate for this role that needs to get filled. You're also going to get from your network some resources or ideas on ways in which to look at your job search differently, and hear about different ways in which to network. So 2 quick things, okay? There's no such thing as a bad LinkedIn connection. It's not so much about who they are, but who they know. And the second is the next job that you get is likely to come from somebody that you did not know before you started your job search. And please do not be disappointed if your closest friends, your family members, your relatives are of absolutely no value to you when it comes to helping you network into companies. I know it can be discouraging, and I know your expectations of these folks can be really high, but a lot of them are uncomfortable with it because they think of you as a brother or a sister. They think of you as a cousin. They think of you as a close friend, but not necessarily are they able to make that transition to you as a job seeker who's looking for a new opportunity. And sometimes they resist because they don't want to disappoint you, because they may assume that you're thinking that they can make a lot of great things happen for you, even when they aren't. So what are some of the keys to an effective networking process? Okay, you got to do your homework before every encounter. Number 2, whenever you have a one-on-one networking meeting, whether it's done over the phone, through Zoom, or in person, make sure you've linked with that person beforehand. Because one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit further down the road here is the connections of feature, because you can filter on first degree connections without having to go through 8 or 10 or 20,000 of their connections. Number 3 and number 4 are very much tied together. You got to make yourself memorable, and that's where having a personal branding statement can make such a huge difference in your ability to be remembered over other people that this individual has been networking with. And likability is a very big factor, particularly in interviews, but it's also a big factor in networking because we like to help people that we like. And so you've got to be able to create a connection on a personal level with the person you're networking with, and for that matter, with the people that you're interviewing with. That likability issue is very big. Memorability comes particularly with having a really strong branding statement. Number 5, you got to make it easy for your network to help you. And I'm going to show you some ways in which, by them just writing one sentence on top of an email that you've already provided to them, it makes it easy for them to help you because they can write that one sentence literally in 1 minute. And now they don't need to do anything else. Number 6, we always want to be getting introductions into the companies that are of specific interest to you, or the key influential people that you're trying to get to that your network can help make that connectivity to. Always follow up with the introductions and provide feedback to the person who's making that introduction. You know, I do a lot of introducing myself, and I like to know what happened. Okay, be sure you go back to these people. Let them know, hey, I connected with so-and-so. We had a great conversation, and he's going to be introducing me to 2 people inside the firm. We love to hear that. Because we know that networking is a big piece, but when people don't give any feedback, it becomes kind of discouraging to the person who's put themselves out there and made an introduction for you. Speaking of which, you got to be willing to put yourself out there. This is in part what the hell approach to job search is about. I've developed this what the hell approach to job search that's built on the premise of what the hell do you have to lose by doing things that other job seekers aren't doing. And that's what it takes to stand out. It's what it takes to get visibility, credibility, and it gets you more interviews. So networking, we know, is at least 70% of the solution to getting your next job. You got to be willing to talk and meet with people that you don't know and do some things that are maybe a little bit out of the ordinary. You've got to solidify your elevator pitch and your value proposition. This is where the messaging and the written word is so important. Got to create that target company list because that's the audience that you're trying to market yourself to. And when you ask your network for help, you've got to be very clear with them on exactly what it is that would be helpful to you. Trying to build out a list of companies by industry, and there's certain privately held firms that are not out in the public domain. Could you give me a sense for some of the companies that maybe are in the range of 100 million to 500 million in annual revenue? You got to tell people what types of companies you're looking for. So industry, private, public, and what kind of people in those firms do you want to potentially get some visibility with. Now you've given some direction to your network so that they can think about, okay, who do I know that's in healthcare, that's, over on the data and analytics side, potentially of a hospital. Great. So that makes it easy for them to say yes. Number 6, make sure you link in with them beforehand and use that feature, and we'll go to that in a second, and create advocates with inside companies, because we know that the chances of getting hired go up dramatically when you've got an advocate, a champion inside the company advocating on your behalf and recommending you to the appropriate and the right people within the company. Now, there's 2 pieces to networking. There's the online environment and there's the offline environment. The online environment today is dominated a lot by LinkedIn because LinkedIn is such a great database. But at some point, after you've put together an ongoing list of people and companies that you want to target, you got to have that human interaction. You can't network without it. So at some point, you got to have these conversations. And the more these 2 converge, the more introductions you're going to get, the more engagement you're going to get with companies that you're trying to break into, and ultimately it's going to get you more interviews. So you got to get these 2 working hand in hand, and this is where 1 and 1 equals 3. So let's talk about some specific actions you can take. I'm going to give you a bunch. So the first one is you want to develop a message map. I don't know if many of you are familiar with this, but it's a process that every one of you should go through. And this is simply an example for an IT individual. Okay, so I start at the top. What is your IT branding statement? Okay, then what's your value proposition summary? And then what are some of the areas where you have excelled? Okay, in this case, it might be network infrastructure, software research and development, IT security, data governance, maybe data and analytics. Great. And then put together a story or 2 or 3 under each one of those categories so that you now, when somebody asks you to tell me a little bit about yourself, you can start to put this together. So again, branding statement, value proposition, which sits right at the top of your resume and it's right at the top of your LinkedIn profile in the about section, and start to think about stories, achievement stories that fall under the various categories for the role or roles that you would likely be pursuing. You should create a one-page handbill. We use these a lot within NSE&G because not everybody wants to take the time to read through a 2- and 3-page resume. But this is actually a one-page document, and it's basically telling the reader, and this is probably the only time you're going to put your photograph onto a document. But you want to in this case because when you're in networking meetings, a lot of these get floated around, and that photograph helps people tie it back to your name. Okay, that's who he was. But it's simply asking a couple quick things. Describe who you are, what you do, what are your areas of expertise, and how you add value. But that piece down at the bottom is the most important. Specific companies that you are trying to target by industry. And this is where you enable your network to help you. Because you can go on to LinkedIn once you've put together this target company list, and you can start to find very specific people who either are working in some of those firms or are connected to people in those firms. And so if you've got a first-degree connection who has connections into a number of companies you're trying to target, well, that's one of what might be several people that you want to go to and say, hey, I see you're connected to, Jennifer Jones at ABC Incorporated. I was wondering if you knew her well enough to make a potential introduction. And we'll talk about, how some of those emails can be implemented really easy and quickly for you. Number 3, you want to find contacts by industry or title, and it's so easy to do that. So for those of you that maybe are not quite as adept at LinkedIn, and it's interesting, I've done a lot of surveys on people that are in job searches and what is their knowledge of and how to use the LinkedIn platform. On average, people seem to know about 30 to 40% of what LinkedIn can do for them when they're in a search, because there's so many features that they aren't as familiar with. This is one very simple feature that's just fantastic for job seekers, and it's a filtered search. You click up, you go into LinkedIn, you click on the search bar, you hit your enter button, and then from the list, you pick people, and then there's another choice there for all filters. And LinkedIn's going to deliver to you a screen like this. And it's basically asking you, well, what kind of people are you looking for? Okay, in this particular example, I said, I'm looking for second-degree connections that live in the greater Chicago area, but I could have put down 10 cities or states if I wanted to. I'm looking for people in certain industries, maybe information technology, okay, in this particular case. And I want people with certain titles. So use a Boolean search. I said CEO space capital OR or Chief Information Officer. I could continue on with more, or VP Marketing, any number of things, Director Sales. So again, who are you looking for? You could put in first, but you should already know them, and you can get a list of all of them by downloading them off of LinkedIn. Secondary connections, greater Chicago area, all from IT, and I want people with very senior titles. And of course, it then gives me all those individuals. So now I've done a filtered search by industry and title and geography. Okay, and here they all are. Okay, obviously, the more LinkedIn connections you have, the more results you're going to get. And that's why one of the important things with networking is to constantly be increasing the number of LinkedIn connections that you have. Because I know that as somebody who's got a lot of LinkedIn connections, the results I get are pretty substantial. And even when I'm being extremely picky, but if you only have 500 or so LinkedIn connections, I can tell you a real easy way to get to 1,000 within a couple weeks is if you join NSENG, the free membership, join our LinkedIn group. You can connect with all of these folks because they all get it. They either currently are in a job search, or they were in one and they've landed, and they understand the value of networking, not only to you as a job seeker, but to them also, because many of them will be looking for their next job in what might be another 12 months or 5 years, because people's movement from company to company has escalated so much over time. You always want to prepare for one-on-one networking meetings. So the first thing is link in with people beforehand so you can do this connections of capability. But you got to be clear about what information you're looking for with the people that you're networking with. It may be companies that they may know in specific industries. You may be looking for some company intelligence, or particularly the organizational structure. People on the inside can share a lot of very valuable information with you on how various departments are structured. How do they feed into, the bigger organization? Because you want to know who in whatever department it might be in HR, who is it in operations, who is in marketing or sales, are the people that I need to make my presence known to. And people on the inside, can share that with you. You want to know about industry trends or obstacles that you may want to be aware of. And of course, getting those introductions into the right folks that can help make a difference in your candidacy. Make sure you always review people's LinkedIn profiles before you network with them. You may have a lot in common with them that you didn't realize. Common LinkedIn connections. You may belong to similar LinkedIn groups. You may have some activities that you do outside of the work environment that are similar to what you do. Because LinkedIn profiles have an area down at the bottom where people can put their interests and activities. And oftentimes people will list out charitable causes, volunteering efforts, programs that they've been a part of, and things they like to do with their free time. And maybe some of those resonate with your background. And so this is one way you can actually address the likability capability within your networking activities. You may belong to similar industries, or maybe they've lived in a city where you've been as well. So again, here's what you can do now with this connections of feature. Go into LinkedIn, click on the search bar. In the drop-down menu, click on all filters. And once you get to all filters, you're going to see there's going to be a category for connections of. You can insert anybody who is a first-degree connection into that space. And then you can tell LinkedIn, all right, I want to do a search on John Smith's, or whoever is your first degree connection. And they may have 7,000, 8,000 connections, which is great for you. But you don't have the time to look at 7,000 or 8,000. So then what you can do is you can tell through the all filters criteria-based search, I want second degree connections to me, first degree connections to John. I want them in a certain city or several states. Don't even have to pick a state if you don't want. And then you can go down to the bottom to the industry category and tell them what industries you might be looking for people in. And you can pick as many as you want. And then it will give you on the right-hand side of the screen here, the output of all the people that meet this very specific criteria for an individual who I am connected to, but I don't want to have to start looking through several thousand of their connections. I've now told LinkedIn what kind of people I want from this individual person, and I can do that for anybody who I'm a first degree connection with. This is how you enable your network to start helping you. And we'll talk about some of the scripts that can go along with this so you can communicate to people how they can help you. So when you do this connections of feature, what you should also be doing before you get into that one-on-one conversation with this person, after having gone through all of their LinkedIn connections, but looked at them in a very filtered way, take screenshots of the people that you want to get introduced to, put them onto a Word document. You can then share that document either during your call, at the end of your call, because some networking calls you may be having with people that you've not known, and you want to build up that rapport with them. Because at the end, you want to be able to present them with screenshots of some of the people that they're connected to that happen to be working in companies or in industries or that have job functions that are of particular interest to you. You can tell these people, you know what, I've gone through all your LinkedIn connections, and I have found 6 individuals that you're connected to that I would love to have a conversation with. Do you know any of these people well enough to make a potential introduction? You've made it real easy for them to say yes. To say yes is the most important thing here. So let's say they look at this and they go, you know what, I don't know all 6, but 2 of them, one of them I've worked with before, and the other, you know what, I coach his son for baseball in a travel baseball league. Great. Be happy to introduce you to those 2. Perfect. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send you an email telling you why I'd like to have a conversation with that individual. And then all you have to do is put a one-liner on top of my note, send it on to that individual that I'd like to talk with. And if you wouldn't mind copying me on that correspondence, I'd really appreciate it. Asking for that last piece is an important request, because if you get copied on the email introducing you to another person, first of all, you know that the request was sent. And secondarily, if you don't hear back from that targeted individual that you don't know, but you've just been introduced to because you were CC'd on the email, if you haven't heard back in, say, 3 days, you now have the ability to email that person directly off of the introduction email that was sent to you. So just keep building on it. Just say, hey, just following up on the email you received from Steve Smith on the 22nd, was wondering if you might have 5 minutes for a quick conversation, because I'd love to get a little bit more background on the company, or it might be a specific job. But this is how you really start to get a lot of value from your network, because in most cases, people are happy to help. They just don't know how. But when you present them with a document like this, you've now given them the means and the vehicle by which they can make introductions, because there's no mistaking who these people are. You got your photograph, you've got their title, you've got the name of the company they work for, and they're all connected to this individual you're networking with. And if they can make the introduction, they will. I can tell you, I never walked away empty-handed when I did this. But like I said, if you've got 5,000 LinkedIn connections and that you aren't leveraging a tool like this, you're probably not getting as much out of your network as you could. So keep this in mind. Again, the connections of feature, not used near enough, but hugely valuable to anybody who's trying to network into companies. So let's talk about a couple scripts that might make sense for you. Okay, I'm going to give you a few different example situations to refer to. So this is a script to a networking contact where there is a job inside a company. Okay, you are this woman on the left. Your networking contact is sitting in the middle, but the person you really want to get to is that hiring manager inside that company. This is the kind of message that you can send to your networking contact. I'm interested in a project management director opening at ABC Incorporated, and notice that you're connected to Jennifer Jones, their VP of project management. Do you know Jennifer well enough to make an introduction? If so, I'm happy to send you an email expressing my interest in the role so that you could then put a sentence on top of that introducing us both. I welcome your thoughts. This is easy. And of course, you're going to send this kind of note out to several people potentially inside that company. But you could start with one person. And if you don't get anywhere with that, or he or she is uncomfortable making, then go on to the next person or two that might have connectivity into that hiring manager, or at least somebody inside the company. So there is a job. This is how you leverage somebody that's in your network for an introduction. Here's another scenario. This is a script to a networking contact. Let's assume it's the same guy. There's a job, but it's not to the hiring manager. Okay. This person who's the networking contact doesn't know the hiring manager, but does know somebody inside the company who then can become your advocate to the hiring manager. I'm interested in a project management director opening at ABC Incorporated and notice that you are connected to George Clooney, their director of marketing. Do you know George well enough to make an introduction? And if so, I'm happy to send you an email expressing why I'd like to talk with him for 5 or 10 minutes. And you can then put a simple sentence on top of it. Again, you don't know George, but your friend here, who's your networking contact, is connected to him and maybe knows him well enough to make this introduction. And then you're going to have connectivity into George. You're going to build, a brief rapport with George, and then be able to share with him, how he could potentially help you. Okay. And by the way, if George recommends you and you get hired, you may have just put a couple $1,000s in his pocket. Most companies are doing this because, for one thing, it's an awful lot cheaper than using an outside recruiter. But they also know that when you get people inside the company recommending somebody, they tend to be really good employees. So again, let's look at another situation. Here's a script to a networking contact, but there is no job in the company specifically. Many of the companies that are going to be sitting on your target company list may not have jobs for you today. They may not be hiring at all, but it should never stop you, because some of the greatest opportunities are hidden. They're not on Indeed. They're not on LinkedIn. They're not on Career Builder or ZipRecruiter. Companies have just decided in some cases not to advertise them online, or maybe they're in the thinking stages. They haven't yet decided about hiring somebody for a specific position. And sometimes getting an email from somebody or a background on somebody who's got some skills that they don't have but they need opens up a great exploratory conversation. So again, this is the scenario: is there is no job. It's a company that you want to get access into, and again, building off of your network. Here's the note from you to your networking contact. As you may know, I'm currently in an active search, and one of my companies on my target company list is ABC Incorporated. I noticed that you're connected to George Clooney. Okay. Do you know George well enough to make an introduction so I can get a bit background on the company? Okay. No different. And then that conversation that you're going to have with George isn't about a job. It's about understanding how is the project management group organized. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to work in this company? And could you share with me who that hiring manager would be if they were looking for somebody for, say, a director or management role in project management? Okay. The fact is that, so many companies, you've got people that are willing to share information, but you don't have to reside and put all your luck just into one person. You might have multiple networking contacts that can introduce you into multiple people inside the company that's of interest to you. So don't assume that just because one person, in this case George Clooney, wasn't willing to step up and make the introduction for you, don't assume all is lost. There may be other people that are in your network that are also connected into ABC Incorporated that could do something for you in the way of an introduction to somebody influential inside that firm. This is the last scenario, is a script to somebody inside the company. There is no job, okay? And you're sending it to somebody you don't even know, okay? Again, this is part of the what the hell approach to job search, because you've got to be willing to do things that, maybe historically you wouldn't consider doing. But nobody enjoys being unemployed. And the shorter the time frame for getting reemployed, the happier you're going to be. Because the one question that nobody out there can ever answer is, how long is it going to take for me to land my next job? Nobody can. There's too many variables. And it's all the more reason why there's nothing wrong in going and sending a cold email or a cold LinkedIn connection to somebody inside a company that's of interest to you who you don't know. But notice I say, send it to the insider you don't know and 3 other people, because there's no guarantee that the one person you pick is going to do what you want them to do. So maybe 1 out of 4. Maybe you'll get 2 out of 4. Again, it's a LinkedIn request because you don't know this person's email address. My name is Sandra Smith, and I'm looking for my next career opportunity. I'm very interested in ABC Incorporated and was wondering if you would be open to having a 5-minute call so I can get your advice on how to create more visibility for my background. Welcome your thoughts. Happy to return the favor. Now, if you send this to 3 or 4 people inside the company, none of who you know, the chances of getting at least one of them to accept your connection and to agree to have a brief conversation with you, I think is pretty good. It's pretty good. I've had people that have gotten 2 out of 4, 2 out of 3. Okay. Again, with people that they've never met or connected with. They don't know them at all. But there are so many people out there that have been through job searches. And they empathize with the situation that some of you may be in, and in which case they want to give back. Okay. And what's it going to take? 5 minutes of their time to help you better understand who are the players that you want to get in touch with? It's an easy request, but you have to be obvious about what you're looking for, and then offer to return the favor. Okay. They can then go back and look at your LinkedIn connections, and maybe you've got some people that you're connected to that they would love to have some conversations with. So you've got to get comfortable with doing these kinds of things. There's nothing egregious with it. And what's the worst that can happen? Nothing. They don't do anything. So the worst thing is you aren't any worse off than you were before you started. So please be an individual who's going to be proactive, take the initiative, and be open, to trying some of those things. Next slide. Number 10. LinkedIn allows you to join up to 100 LinkedIn groups. 100. Now, these can be groups. They can be both big and small. They can be by industry. They can be by job function. They can be by geographic location, and or combinations of these. One of the important things about joining LinkedIn groups is that when you join a LinkedIn group, you can see every single member in that group. You can see all their profiles because every member has made themselves visible to all the other members. So if you are in, say, software and you're looking for a sales job, well, there are a ton of software LinkedIn groups. Many of them are global, which means they could have tens or hundreds of thousands of members. You could be looking at software groups that are for salespeople, software sales. There are a lot of those groups. You can look for software sales in Cincinnati, software sales in San Francisco, in Boston, in LA. You will find these groups. As you get more specific, the group size gets smaller. But one of the limiting factors will oftentimes be the physical geography. Will make those groups smaller, but it gets you much more targeted if what you want are, folks that are in software that have jobs in development and that live in Houston. You're going to get them all right in that group. And you can see their profiles. And then, of course, then you can start to see who they're connected to. Who do you then, within this group, there are going to be specific people that you then want to get LinkedIn connectivity to, because then you can start to filter on their connections and do connections of filtered searches on their backgrounds to get potential introductions into folks that they're connected to. Number 11, LinkedIn is a great database, but it's not enough to just have a profile. You can join all these groups. You can also get active enough where you're actually posting things on LinkedIn, and I do this a lot. I did my first video on LinkedIn, and I know everybody's not necessarily comfortable with creating videos, But I did a short video on my what the hell approach to job search several years ago. I posted it onto 42 LinkedIn groups, and within 7 days, I had 10,000 views of that video. Imagine that. 10,000 people watched my video within a week because I posted it onto very specific LinkedIn groups that I thought would have an interest in viewing it. So when you go onto LinkedIn, you can post articles. They don't have to be things that you always write yourself. Don't be afraid to comment on other people's articles. Don't be afraid to share other people's work. You can write original things yourself. People love to hear about thought leadership and your perspectives. And if you start to get comments or likes on things, it starts to raise you and your credibility within the platform. It also will get you more connections on LinkedIn. Because when people see you posting stuff that's interesting, what do? In many cases, they come back and they check out your LinkedIn profile. And these are people then you should start to connect with. And you can, of course, you can target folks that are part of this connections of universe by industry, by title, by company, by geography. There's no end to the number of kinds of searches. You can even look for searches by company size, by physical geography, by industry on LinkedIn. This leads to the elevator pitch. Now, what you want to be able to describe in an elevator pitch is, what is your branding, your value proposition, and then maybe some things that characteristically help define who you are. This is an old elevator pitch of mine, but I highlighted a few areas in here. Okay, my name's Marty Gilbert, and I'm a VP of marketing who drives incremental revenue growth. Driving incremental revenue growth kind of became, my branding statement. Okay, unlike most marketing folks, I've actually carried a sales bag. And that's what has enabled me to create marketing initiatives that help direct sales teams and channel partners to shorten the sales cycle. There's the value. How do we shorten sales cycle? How do we get more business in a shorter period of time? I've actually lived in their shoes. Okay. And that paragraph by itself made me memorable to many people when I was in a job search, because people thought, oh, okay, he's the guy, marketing guy who also sold. Okay. And he then went on to talk about different marketing initiatives that he's done that help drive more and more incremental revenue, like digital marketing, new product launches, the international experience, and P&L responsibility. The combination of these things made me unique in the marketplace. Every one of you needs to go through this process. This is a big part, obviously, of the job search coaching that I do, because a lot of people aren't real comfortable writing about themselves. But the writing and your value proposition are probably the two most important aspects of what you do in your job search, because your job search is not an HR exercise. It's a marketing exercise. It's about positioning, packaging, messaging, and getting visibility with folks through an outbound marketing campaign to companies that have jobs, but equally important to companies that don't have jobs, because there's a lot more of those companies. And you don't have to worry about those 100-to-1 odds of all these people that are applying to the ones with jobs. And I'm not telling you to not apply to those jobs. You should. But then my question is, what are you doing with the other 90% of your work week? And that's why building out that target company list is so important. So the keys to getting great introductions: defining your target audience by company, by industry, using LinkedIn to find first and second degree connections into those target companies. Email your networking contacts for introductions into those people. Number 4, provide your network contact with an email for passing along to an individual, so that all they have to do is write a one-liner on top of it and their job is done. If you don't hear back from that network, the networking contacts email was sent to an individual that you really want to get to. If you haven't heard back from that individual within 3 days and you were copied on that email, feel free to just take that email that introduced the two of you and say, hey, I'm just following up from the email that you received from Joe on Monday. Was wondering if you might have 5 minutes for a quick conversation. Okay. Again, what's the worst that can happen? They don't respond, or they say no, or they say, you know what, I passed your resume on to HR, or I passed your resume on to the hiring manager. Okay. Which is also a good thing. Okay. Getting that visibility now starts to get some activity going inside the company on your behalf. And by all means, number 6, let your network know, how things have gone from the people that they've introduced you to. So before we open it up to questions, JJ, I just want to remind folks of a couple things. If you have not yet joined NSENG, go to nsenginc.com, take advantage of the free membership. You're going to get access to all of our members, and you're going to get 2 webinar recordings from me. Send me a LinkedIn connection if you're not connected, and I'll give you connectivity to 28,000 of my connections. Join our LinkedIn group. Check out the videos and podcasts and TV interviews that I've done sitting in the About section of the website. Look at the upcoming events and the library of recordings. These are the 2 events coming up, one on the 26th and then another one on May 10th. And if any of you feel you need some outside assistance, I do a lot of job search coaching. I've got coaching packages that you can purchase right on the website. And I'm happy to have exploratory free conversations with you on your search. I do a lot of one-on-one customized coaching where I'm rewriting people's value proposition, critiquing their resumes and LinkedIn profiles, helping them with how to interview better, cover letters, target company list, anything associated with the job search. It can be tailored to any of your needs. So with that in mind, happy to open it up to any questions anybody may have.
All right. Thank you very much, Marty. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
My computer is still being possessed. So we'll try to work it this way and get to some questions. As Marty mentioned, we will happily take some. You can put them in the comments below your video there. And I'll start with one that already came in from Brent. And he said, will you speak briefly about how these practices also would apply to networking for your next job within your own company, your existing company? Do you have any different recommendations for these practices if they're internal to where you already work?
Yeah. So so a couple things here. When you're networking to people inside the firm, and there's a job that is inside the company that's of interest to you, well, the first thing you want to go, you want to understand that organization, okay? And it may be a totally different department than where you sit today. And I would urge you to have some conversations with some of the people in that department, okay? Not necessarily with people who might be threatened by you. Okay, people who may feel, wait, he's interested in the job that I have. Maybe they don't have a head count. You don't know, but you're going to get great information from people inside that department. And networking inside a company is far easier than networking with people that don't know you or people that aren't inside already the company that you want to get into. So same process, only, now you're going to be emailing potentially if you're not, working in office, an individual for, again, brief conversation. I'd like to find out a little bit more about the operations department and was wondering if you might have time for a quick conversation. Can you hear me, JJ?
Yeah, sorry about that. All right. We're figuring this out as we go with some tech issues, but you can hear me, right, Marty?
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. This is a more broader question, but hopefully you'll weigh on it, from Daniela. And she says, when do you know it's time for a new job?
There can be a lot of different indicators here. If you didn't get the promotion you thought you should have gotten, if you didn't get the merit increase, got a little feedback, that you felt you deserved, if you don't see growth, if you don't see a path to your next opportunity inside that company, if you're working for a boss, and oftentimes bad bosses led me to make job changes. And I know it can be pretty miserable if you're working for somebody you don't respect, or somebody that you're not getting along with. My first advice would be not to necessarily leave the company. See if you can find something else inside a company, maybe in a different role in a different department. But those are indicators that if there's no future for you here, and that's the kind of conversation you should be able to have with your current boss. What is the career path for me here? And you'll be able to tell, just how honest they're being with you. Because if there really isn't a next step that you can go on to, then I think that's a good reason, or reason enough, to start looking for something else. Because we all want to have, a progression over time. And if you don't see it or don't believe in it, then start looking.
All right, thanks, Marty. And how, another question that's a little broader than networking, but how to enter the remote workforce? A lot of people now are seeing more remote jobs, and I think the remote jobs get a lot more applications on Indeed or whatever, and so it's even harder. So I think probably the main answer is do more of what you're saying throughout your presentation, but any other thoughts?
Yeah. Not every job that is remote is being advertised as being remote. Okay. And that's in part because some companies, are of the thinking, well, at some point here, we're going to have people back in the office, or they're going to be spending 3 days a week in the office. So a lot of times, remote jobs are not necessarily advertised as that. But the one thing that I will tell you, for the right candidate, oftentimes companies are willing to show a level of flexibility that they may not have shown in the past. Because one of the only good things that's come out of COVID-19 is the fact that a lot of companies who were absolutely insistent about surrounding themselves in their home office with all of their people have finally come to realize that you can actually empower your people to be highly productive, and in some cases far more productive, working from home, because they don't have all the interruptions of being in an office, and they don't have all that commute time and all that wasted time in long drawn out meetings and conference rooms. So, I just, urge you to approach every job, whether it has been advertised as being remote or in office, because if you are by far the best candidate and you don't want to work in an office, I would still go through the process, stay in the game, because you may find that there may be more flexibility for you than was advertised, because you have been able to convince them that you are absolutely the best candidate for this position. The power can start to shift over to the potential employee when they've gotten down to just 2 people, or that they've decided that you are the ideal candidate for this position.
Okay, good. This is another topic I know we've covered before, Marty, but it seems to always come up. And David asked about ageism generally, and then Lisa also asked about networking to find a job at age 55 plus, and any thoughts on those 2 topics, please?
All right, I appreciate the question. I've actually found during my career 3 different jobs, 3 or 4 different jobs once I passed the age of 50. Okay, I know what it's like personally. A lot of people that I coach are over the age of 50 or 55. I think the oldest person I've coached that I helped get a job was 70 years old. Okay, and there are people well into their 70s that are still working. One suggestion I would have is to check out my 2-hour webinar presentation on how to beat age discrimination during your job search. And I talk about over 20 different actions you can take to help make the chances of becoming a victim far less. I'll just share a couple with you. One is that there's a good chance that some of you that are already in your 50s or in your 60s, you may be working for a millennial. Okay, this person might be 10 or 20 years younger than you. Okay, one thing I urge you to do: grab some millennials, talk to them, find out. And for those of you who have kids, you probably have access to millennials. Ask them have they ever interviewed a baby boomer? Have they ever had one working for them? Have they ever had anybody reporting to them over 50? And what are their impressions? Because their feedback is going to be helpful to you, because these are stereotypes that a lot of people may have of people in your age category. In which case, now you can start to think, okay, if that's what they're thinking, what is it that I can do to overcome that issue? One of the greatest assets that you have as an older job seeker is all your experience. Because if you're competing with somebody who might be 10, 15 or more years younger than you, there's so much more that you've done and seen and been through that they haven't. And so you really have to turn your experience into your greatest assets with examples. This is where the storytelling is so important for anybody in a job search, because it's the proof behind the claims you make. It's not enough to say that I've generated, 1,000 leads in 12 months. No, tell us about what those leads translated to. They led to, $8 million in incremental income, or I helped drive an increase of, 27% in website traffic in a 9-month period. Whatever, might be some of the metrics that you could potentially use, but you've got to have those achievements to go along with the things that you use to describe your experience. But your experience cannot be denied. And just because you're now 58 years old, doesn't mean that your skills are any less valuable. No, they're extremely valuable. And particularly when you think about it, the people that are doing much more of the job hopping today are the younger people. In many cases, if they don't get that job title, that promotion, the kind of increase they were expecting within 2 years, they're leaving. And I know many people in their 50s or 60s aren't near as concerned about the money. They're more concerned about the security and the stability of the place that they're going to work at next, because in many cases, they don't want to be looking again. And the fact is that for some of you, you may even be willing to take less compensation than you were working, particularly if your children have graduated from college, because you just got a $40,000 to $60,000 pay increase that you don't have to live with anymore. So there are a number of things you can do. I urge you to you can check out the webinar recording, and feel free to to email me at any time with any other questions in that category, because it's a very serious problem for a lot of people, and it does prevent many folks from being able to land the kind of jobs that they think they deserve.
All right, thank you. Now, I guess we have kind of the opposite question from TJ, the opposite end of the spectrum. Do you have any specific advice for college students who are graduating this spring who have not yet secured employment?
Yeah. Now, one of the things that my kids always did after their sophomore and junior years, they got internships, and I realize not everybody's able to get internships, but in each case, they led to to some jobs for them. But the approach for somebody coming right out of school is no different. It's no different than somebody who's been in the workforce for 20 or 30 years. And for any of you that are going to be graduating or have recently graduated from school, one of the things you ought to be doing is be growing your LinkedIn connections significantly. And I remember with both of my children, I told them, by the time you graduate college, you better have at least 500 LinkedIn connections, because that's how you're going to get potential introductions in some cases. And so if you don't have a lot of those connections, you can get 50 in 50 minutes when you join NSENG, because you can just be linking it with members. Copy paste into the invitations. But the most important ingredients that anybody needs, and particularly for young people, is what's your value proposition summary? That section that sits at the top of your resume. How do you describe your background? Okay, who's the audience you're trying to reach? What industries? What target companies? And then using LinkedIn to find the people that you want to message to, because I don't encourage people to send LinkedIn in mails. I would rather that you send emails to people's work email addresses. And 98% of all the people in this country have one of two email formats. It's either jsmith@abc.com or john.smith@abc.com. And if neither one of those work, then you should go to a website by the name of hunter.io, hunter.io. You can plug in the name of a company. It will give you examples of people's email addresses that you can then apply to the people you're trying to connect into. But everything that I've described to you here is no different for somebody who's 24 versus somebody who is 64. It works. And I've seen it work with many of the young people that I've coached.
All right, great, thank you. And we had a question from Ryan, who asked if you could talk about how companies use these similar types of networking techniques to find people from the opposite side.
So one of the greatest tools, by the way, for companies when it comes to recruiting is LinkedIn. I mean, they're all using it. And they're going into the back end of LinkedIn and they're plugging in a few things. One is the key skills. Okay, the key requirements of this job that we're trying to fill. Okay, And the kind of skills, let's just take, for example, I'll take a marketing person, a marketing role. The key skills might be marketing communications, lead generation, website management, social media, search engine optimization, new product introductions. These are the harder hitting skills. The fact that you are collaborative and have high energy and are passionate about the manufacturing field, those kinds of skills don't matter much at all. And I would never put those kinds of things into your value proposition summary, but I would put the other words. So people that go into the back end of LinkedIn, they're plugging in key skills, and it's the most important requirements of the job. In some cases, they're also plugging in certain companies. They want people who have worked at certain companies because they like to get people who already have worked in the industry in some cases, or have worked for some very fine firms that they think highly of. And so to me, those are the most important things. The one that you can control the most is the keyword matching when it comes to key skills, because a resume is all about less is more. How do I say all the right things, the right keywords, and the right phraseology in the fewest words possible? But the LinkedIn profile is just the opposite. It's about more is more. How do I load my LinkedIn profile with more and more of the right keywords and key phrases that are harder hitting, so that when people go into the back end of LinkedIn and start plugging in these key skills, I'm going to score higher and potentially get myself a phone screen because I got a much bigger score. As a result, they think I'm a better fit and a better match. So your LinkedIn profile has a lot to do with being able to get it. So.
All right, thank you. And last call for questions. We'll ask one or two more of Marty, and then so if there's any live viewers that still want to ask anything, go ahead and punch those in. I have one more from Cheryl asking about part-time jobs. Any specific advice for those who are looking for part-time instead of full-time?
I'm not, and I'm sure there are websites probably that advertise part-time jobs. I'm just not familiar with them, but I'm sure they're out there and you can find them. But my feeling is, again, put together your target company list with the individuals you want to market yourself to, and your introductory email to them should simply be, got a very extensive, finance background or whatever. Here's a few examples of what I've done. And I just was wondering if you were looking for anybody on a part-time basis, be interested in having an exploratory conversation with you, because there aren't near as many, obviously, part-time jobs online. In which case, I think you want to take that hidden job market approach and send these emails out to companies that you'd like to work for, but let them know you're interested in a part-time opportunity. It's a far more affordable solution for them, because in many cases, you won't be working enough hours for them to have to provide the expense associated with health benefits. And it might be easy for them to plug you into something either on a temporary or part-time basis. So yeah, I would approach this the same way.
All right. Oops, there we go again. Okay. I think I've now that we're to the end of the call, hopefully I finally figured out the audio issues between my cell phone and my computer here. So sorry, folks, for a few screeches there. And that's all the questions we have, Marty. So we really appreciate you staying past, and a great presentation. I agree with all of these techniques, and I think it's really important for people to be aggressive with the amount of people they're reaching out to, but then like your messages are passive, and not take it personally if you don't hear back. You're not going to hear back from everybody. Just keep after it. So hopefully that was helpful to our audience, and we really appreciate your time, Marty. Thanks so much for joining us again, and with that, I will sign off.
Okay. Thanks so much.
An honor.
Thank you, everybody joining. Thank you.